Hello, everyone. We're just going to start now. Welcome to our conversation today. As we consider queer and BIPOC experiences through Brendan's work, it is important to acknowledge the context we live in and work in. Richmond Art Gallery Association is honored to work on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Hakamian-speaking people. This is a language spoken by Musqueam and other communities along the Fraser Delta. As we gather online, I want to take this opportunity to invite everyone here to share the lands they are joining us from. Please share it in the chat if you're interested. I'm going to hand it off to Shaun Dacey, the director of the Richmond Art Gallery now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jazz. You never got to introduce yourself. Jazz is the president of the Richmond Art Gallery Association board, and at Richmond Art Gallery, we're so honored to have an association to work with. And thanks, Jazz, for making that land acknowledgement today. Welcome, everyone. So we are very excited about this conversation today. And I'm very excited to have all these guests, kind of a bi-coastal talk today. But before we jump into it, I want to give a bit of a background about Inaction after I sip this water. I want to say Inaction has been over a 3-year project, starting way back in 2018 or 2019, and is a co-commission and co-presentation with Wesleyan University and Richmond Art Gallery. And we are very excited that we received support from the Canada Council to make this whole project happen. So the initial project, and you'll hear a bit more about it because we have Benn here from Wesleyan University, happened in 2019. Inaction addresses the potential for change through collective action. So the installation comprises of 2 main components: a newly commissioned series of 9 sculptural works, and the 2-channel video projection free fall for camera. Working in collaboration with the architecture and design firm Norman Kelley, Fernandes has designed a set of mobile dance supports and platforms for activation by local dancers. The mats, rug, tumblers, and square grid evoke the communal spaces of training and play, such as gymnasiums and playgrounds. In public performances throughout both exhibitions, Fernandes choreography guided dancers to utilize the objects in movements referencing childhood games. I think a really interesting aspect of this exhibition actually is, like so many things, has been the pandemic. So the installation at Wesleyan University happened in fall 2019. And our installation is just closing today. And I think through the journey of both exhibitions, we really thought about the performances in different ways. So not only in each exhibition is it really considering the local context and working with local dancers. I think the exhibitions had quite different challenges to work through. And in the most recent case, having to consider working in and through a pandemic to produce this dance performance. So overall, I think, the Inaction is really sort of considering systems of support, play, and care, which seems so pertinent at this moment. And thinking about how our bodies, going through these aspects of systemic violence and thinking about these potentials for change through physical collectivity, through gathering, and through physical support. So the way today is going to work, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation. We've invited some of the dancers from the initial installation at Wesleyan University. We also have Benn from Wesleyan. We have Brendan. We have, instead of going through bios, we have posted in the chat the more formal bios of each person. But I'm going to give each person a moment to introduce themselves. But first, I did want to pass it over to Benn to give a bit of an intro from his perspective over at the Zilkha Gallery at Wesleyan University. So perhaps, Benn, I'll let you turn on your mic and say hi and say a few words before we introduce everybody else.
Sure, thanks, Shaun. That was a lovely introduction, and it's so nice to be here with you all today. And it seems so impossible to look back at those images of the fall of 2019 and think about how innocently we were gathering in such proximity, and how much I miss that. I miss all of you. I miss all of my loved ones and family, and I miss the very thing that Inaction is built upon, which is just what you said, Shaun, so nicely, the potential for change in gathering together, and that seems like such, beyond all the other horrors of the past year, one of the things that's really been taken away from all of us is that sense of solidarity and being together. So I'm glad to have at least this surrogate here today on Zoom. It's such a pale replacement, but so yeah, as Shaun mentioned, I'm the associate director of visual arts here at Wesleyan University, and I was lucky enough to when I arrived at Wesleyan to have already had the opportunity in play of Brendan coming to Wesleyan. So my colleague Rosemary Lennox, who's not able to be with us today, had reached out to Brendan and initiated a conversation with him about an exhibition here, which is what eventually became Inaction. And I think, to speak to a little bit of I was thinking earlier today about the kind of like true nature of your work, Brendan, being collaborative to its core, that every aspect of Inaction, beyond from the meta structure of working together with an institutions working together to produce the exhibition, was collaborations with Norman Kelley to design objects and the exhibition as a whole, to you're working with everybody who danced in the dances to enact the choreography in the space, and then and also Brendan, maybe you can jump in because I've totally forgotten his name right now, or their name, who designed the costumes.
Rad Haruni, yeah.
Yeah, Rad Haruni designed all the dancers' costumes. So, and then just to go even one step further, when the exhibition was at Wesleyan, we also then worked to make the dance floor and the gallery floor also a place of gathering for students in ways that were not possible in other spaces on campus. So to really kind of fulfill the promise of Inaction. So I'm really glad to be with you all here today and hear about your experiences in retrospect, thinking back to this time, and then how it may have changed both from space to space, but also what's happened in the change in our world in the last year. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Benn.
Thanks so much, Benn. And I wanted to allow each other person with us today to quickly kind of introduce themselves. So maybe I'll invite Kiara first to say a few words and how you are connected to the project.
For sure. Thank you for having me in this space. I feel so honored, and I'm just happy to see everyone's face. But yeah, I was a dancer at Wesleyan. I actually graduated last year in 2020. So I was a dancer in Action, and then I also got to work with Brendan for a period of time before we transitioned to making the piece collaboratively with the students at Wesleyan. So, I mean, I guess I'm connected to this piece in terms of being a dancer. I consider Brendan as a friend, a mentor, a guide. So just a lot of things that I learned from just being in the process of making an action alongside Brendan.
Thanks so much, Kiara. I will let Charles introduce. Oh, do you want to say something, Brendan?
Yeah, one quick thing, Kiara. Also, you forgot to mention that you performed for me as well in the MCA show that summer when you came to Chicago. So a call and response at the MCA in Chicago.
Yeah, so I got to see a little bit of like how you create pieces before doing an action with call and response at the MCA. So that was like a very amazing experience as well. And I feel changed because of it.
So I will let Charles say a few words and introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Charles Gowin. I am a dancer based in Brooklyn. I've known Brendan for several years and performed in many works. I performed in Inaction and also was partially there to be a guide to the students, to show them sort of how to interact with these large objects in the space. Also as like a guide from another piece performed at the Whitney called The Master in Form. I think that's the name of it. To sort of like impart some knowledge from that performance into this performance as well.
Thanks so much, Charles. We did also have Rachel, one of the dancers that we worked with here in Richmond, but sadly she had a family emergency and won't be able to join us. Brendan and I can talk a bit more about the Richmond performance a little later on in the discussion. But Brendan, maybe you could say a few words about yourself, and maybe we could even jump into the discussion. And so how did you conceive of this Inaction performance and exhibition, and what was the kind of germination around the project?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I want to first say thanks to Kiara and Charles and to Rachel and to all my dancers. But in this process, I was really thinking about, the space of authorship or authority. And so, Charles came and took some of his professionalism as a dancer and imparted it into to the students, and Kiara kind of also led through the students to kind of understand, the formula or the kind of choreographic tasks that I was or prompts that I was imposing. So they kind of took on that role for me, and I kind of like this idea of passing information from one person to another, and it was a different way of making dance. Normally I create something and I'm like, now you take on that form that I have suggested. But in this, there was a passing of information. So I gave information to Charles and he gave it to the dancers. I gave information to Kiara, she gave it to the dancers. And so it was this kind of way of making dance in a way of a new form. And I think right now I'm really thinking about new forms in very, very specific ways because of the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, I was kind of questioning, I think I was talking to you, Shaun, because I was like, how do I perform in action the way it was made at Wesleyan, but now still call it in action and perform it without intimacies, without touch, without bodies coming in contact with each other. And so that was a huge thing that I was really considering. But how did Inaction begin was, partially on this new form of creating new choreography, passing information on. But I started working through, working with sculptural installations that I call playgrounds, and that dancers can kind of have access to make movements. And so a lot of the early choreography was based on children's games, hide and seek, follow the leader, call and response. And then these devices become, allow for some of these games to be played in. And again, strategic games for children to play, but also, ones that kind of can be considered, political, social political, socially and politically, they can have like a certain kind of strategy to like, you know, capitalism, to win, to suggest finding a certain kind of resolution. And so I wanted to kind of play with that in the choreographies as well. But then, you know, about this notion of inaction, to be moving forward, to continue to generate, but also this idea of being static. And within being static, you know, how can someone still be powerful? And so that was sort of the beginning prompts for it. And again, you know, to gather, to bring people together. The devices allow for bodies to come together. So something else that I've really been considering is like, you know, that space of safe space, of brave space that are challenged and are asked to be considered in this playground.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, maybe opening it up to Benn as well. It'd be great to hear about the context of the Inaction performance at Wesleyan. It just seems like such a different time being there, and what was there, like 15? I want to say 15 dancers, and I want to say 100 people at that opening, and just such a convivial and warm space to view that performance. It'd be great. Yeah, it'd be great to hear about the score and about how that initial performance went. Yeah, do you know either Brendan or Benn or both? Or
I'm gonna say, yeah, Brendan and Kiara may be able to speak to that development a little bit more, but I wondered, actually, Shaun, would it be possible to pull up a picture of the gallery space? Because I think there's a whole other level of collaboration, if you will, or conversation with the architecture that developed in this, in the initial thinking about the show, that I think also necessarily influenced the choreography. And you could, thanks, Melanie. You could object or agree to that, Brendan, if you do. But this, if you can gather from this image, the gallery at Wesleyan, the Zilkha gallery is about 4,000 square feet. It's quite large, and the main space, which you're seeing right here, is about 100 feet long and about 25 feet wide, with this large bay wall of windows facing north. So there's a gentle kind of indirect light into the space. And Norman, it was purposely built as a gallery by an architecture firm, Roche Dinkeloo, as a kind of, like, I would say, neo-brutalist space. And Norman Kelley, who collaborated with Brendan, was very aware of the architect and the history, and was really keen on putting objects in relationship to that space. And so the whole layout of the exhibition was purposefully put in dialogue with the building itself, and also with this idea that it also could pack up and move along. That it wasn't a concrete entity. It wasn't a permanent kind of installation, but these were objects that could you could roll up the carpet, and you could pack up the sculptures, and they could move along to another institutions and have their own relationship to architecture of that space. So I feel like out of that came this idea, in discussion with Brendan, was this idea of having in the center of the space a square rug that had a void in the middle, had a circle in the middle, and sort of these ideas about simple play objects and rudimentary or basic forms that people could act with or interact with. There's a great picture of it. This really was in the center of the space, became both this performance stage where if you were in the middle, you were sort of in the spotlight, if you will, and then it also became a meeting place where people could gather around that center and in a kind of communion or conversation with each other. And so that became the kind of center point of the whole show, quite literally. And both the dancers could walk across the rug, but so could viewers and the audience as they visited the space. So is there, do you want to speak a little bit more, Brendan, about how you conceive, or Kiara, you should jump in too, about how you adjusted or evolved the choreographic process in kind of response to the space once we were actually there.
Yeah, again, as I said, I really considered the architecture, and I think as an art, maker, I always begin my installations as ways of moving through the space first. So I kind of like walk through the space, I kind of feel it, and then with working with Norman and Kelley, we made renderings to kind of figure out where things would be placed. And again, thinking about the pink sculpture here is called square. The centerpiece is called circle, and the black monolith is called triangle. So kind of playing with like simple geometric children's elementary kind of like vernacular, and then making language based on the games. And I think part of the process too was then working first with like Charles and Kiara to kind of experiment, to play, to kind of create vocabulary, and then give it to the rest of the group. And so I don't know if Kiara and Charles want to jump in on that process a little bit.
Yeah, I can definitely jump in. I was going to say like exactly what you were going to say, like the process felt like it started before we even entered into the space or like seeing the objects. I remember like when we first started, you kind of like had tasked me with like, find people on the campus who want to come and play, like who want to come and join in the space and engage with like this notion of inaction and this notion of like bringing people to just sit in a space of play. So that started with like just finding the people who wanted to be there. And then starting like the actual choreography, it felt like we went to kind of each like landmark and then played on that obstacle and then said, okay, what did we enjoy about that? What did we want to keep in it? And then it was more of like Brendan being like, okay, like let's set it here. Like when you're doing this is the space that you're kind of like playing, and this is how you're playing. This is like how you might be interacting or engaging with the people who are playing with you in that specific space. So it really felt like we were like kind of like taking a tour around the space and then setting like choreography with it, and then kind of putting it all together. And then each time it felt so different because there's all these different elements that are coming in and out of this space that has like a set score.
And I think one of the other things was that you had the moments to play, but everything had a time, like a time mark, right? So we knew we had to be spent this amount of time in square, and there was certain gestures, motifs, like I remember saying like trace the square, move the square in a certain way, move your bodies in a certain way. So there was certain tasks or markers, but then the time would come, and you would move to the next space. So it was kind of like a tour, as you said.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to kind of add another element and an interesting context that I saw at Wesleyan is, it is an on-campus gallery. And what I really loved about the performance there was the fact, Brendan, that you were working with student dancers, a mix of student dancers and some, professional. I mean, I hate dividing those terms, but I think there was something interesting there about pedagogy, knowledge exchange, mentorship. So it'd be great to hear from Charles and Kiara and yourself just about that experience of developing that piece. Yeah.
And part of the reason, like also, Charles has worked with me so often, he understands, the process of how I make dance. And so because Charles had worked with me for years, so I wanted also Charles as a professional to come in and to also, be a mentor, to guide and to show the dancers, a different way of moving, or even like that, dance can be a career, right? To kind of bring in that professional side of it as well. So I don't know, Charles, if you want to speak to any of that.
It's always funny to step into an academic space after being in the professional world and being with younger bodies who might not have the knowledge or the willingness to sort of let go and play fully. Everybody was very willing to engage and work through what Brendan was suggesting, but often with younger bodies, you have to sort of break down these conceived notions of like what they think they should do. And I feel like I was in the space primarily to show that this could be a way of how you engage with the square, or how you can engage with a partner across the room while you're holding two ropes between your hands, and how to I like to ooze down the triangle pyramid, and just to be there as another voice or body, so that they could get what Brendan was wanting.
Definitely, and I'm super grateful for that, because all of my dancers always give me their mind, bodies, and physicalities and souls and their cerebral matter. But in this process, I really wanted it to be an exchange again, as I said. And so Charles and Kiara, both came in with already being part of the process beforehand, and then we kind of started to set it and work with the other dancers to kind of pass along the information. And then Charles came back for a couple of the other performances to when I wasn't there, to kind of just to kind of take access and to create a trajectory and space to kind of lead the dancers through.
And I also think that having Charles there made people feel really confident. I think that people, the same thing that you were saying, when people start to play, they're kind of a little cautious of what they're looking like what their clothes are doing, who's in this space. There's all these things that are going on, but seeing this person be very confident, very sure of how to play, and any way that I'm choosing to play that's correct. And I think there's also kind of this sense of osmosis of when the Master in Form was at the Whitney, I had seen Charles there. I've seen Charles in other pieces. I've seen him in other parts of Brendan's work. So kind of having that transfer of energy, I think also was something that I felt from Charles's presence, and all. It just felt awesome to kind of dance with a professional dancer in an academic space. It just felt like a really great opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think it brings up an interesting aspect that I wanted to hear a bit from the dancers. And having worked with Brendan on a few different pieces, I think both of you have, what do you think what is that experience of dancing in a gallery, or what is interesting for you about it, or how do you feel about that, entering that space, versus the other sorts of spaces that you dance in?
It's completely different from a proscenium stage, and sometimes far more enjoyable, and sometimes not. While we were at Wesleyan, the first performance was kind of funny, because people go in and they expect, oh, we're at a performance, there's this space, and it kind of looks like a proscenium when you're standing and looking down, and people were very afraid at first to go into the gallery and sort of surround us, but then one brave kid was like, I'm gonna go do it, and then everybody sort of follows. So it's an interesting thing to see people not only engaged with watching, but also feeling that they can also be a part of the performance. And it's just interesting to be performing while you see people feeling comfortable engaging with you in the space. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
It's a great answer.
Yeah, I feel this was my first interaction with dance being in a museum or gallery space. I had never really, my dance background is really, yeah, in a proscenium setting, but just not in a space where people can kind of surround me at any perspective. So this was my big step of being wow, this is a possibility. Dancers and bodies can also be kind of this work of art in these gallery spaces. And I think another part that I really liked was that the pieces were never really complete without us being there. The fixtures that were in the space, they can move, they can have different positions in the space, but it takes someone to move them. It takes someone to kind of activate them. And that was one part that I really enjoyed. That was it was reset at the end of the day, but whatever happened throughout the day was always something that was dependent on people who were moving those things.
I love those answers, guys. And I think there was also something really beautiful that there was a synergy between the body and the sculpture, right? Your bodies sometimes became the sculpture. Sometimes your bodies, as they're moving them, were kind of creating like a sculpture garden. And I love that fact that, you know, body and object kind of had that synergy, that collision that kind of created something new. And it was always something different every time. And, you know, for me, when I make performance in a gallery, you know, my work is never on a stage, but for me, it's always in spaces and sometimes galleries. But I always think about the kind of idea of how my audience is also part of the performance. Like, you know, your bodies as dancers have an authority and you have a purpose and a trajectory, but you can also, like, you know, manipulate the audience and challenge them. And so you can make them move ways. And, but also then the idea that they see your labor, right? They see you from a proximity where they can see your body shake, or they can hear your body, like, you know, crack, or, you know, they can see you sweat. And so that's also for me partially why I like to make work in galleries, is because we break that structure, that etiquette. But again, it kind of creates like a proximity between the audience and you as a laboring dancer in that moment.
Yeah, I was thinking about that same thing earlier when we were talking about how about what you brought to the performance, Charles, your expertise. I was thinking about something that both of you represented in the Wesleyan performances, both Kiara and Charles, and that was actually a sense of grounding in the space. Like I could really feel the weight of your body in the performance. You had claimed the space that you were in, and there was a different sensibility from person to person in the degree to which their feet were connected to the floor, and I felt I saw that change for you over the course of the performance, Kiara. Like I saw you learn more of that, and Charles, you came in with a degree of experience with that, but I saw that you became a grounding presence for the other dancers in that regard, and that connected right into what you were saying, Brendan, about and this is something that happened. Really, I didn't know it would be there until the performance happened, because I had a long time with the objects and making them, you know, happen before the first performance. But of this, there's so many moments of stillness in your choreography that I think contrast with audience expectations. You know, people expect to be entertained, right? They come to a performance, they want entertainment, and stillness is not exactly what they maybe had in mind. It challenges them, and it also creates this really interesting relationship between object and body, right? Which is kind of also uncomfortable, right? Because we're looking at human beings. We're looking at you, Kiara and Charles, and other dancers on the floor as human beings. And just as you say, Brendan, very corporeal, like can see your nervousness or your sweat or your labor. So definitely not an object, but at the same time, that moments of stillness created this strange tension between the sculptural objects and people. And I think that was also challenging for the viewers. And there's also this, and I had audience members turn to me because I was, you know, the curator, so they could ask me questions of where am I supposed to stand? The level of indeterminacy for the audience. How do they engage with you all? How do they engage with the space? What's permissible for them? Was also kind of a question, you know, that's something they had to negotiate as viewers, and that interplay with what the dancers, what you all were doing on the floor as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that, you know, because there's also within stillness, then there's an expectation that something's going to happen. And there's that, so that tension is something I definitely play with, but also within it, it's a challenge for the dancers. You know, to stay still is a huge challenge. And I ask my dancers to be still. And, you know, sometimes I'll ask the dancers to count, you know, like 8 counts of 8, and they'll do it really quickly. And then they move again, because we want to, there's this idea that within dance, we have to constantly be in action, right? So, so sometimes what I do as a strategy is I get my dancers to dance like a repertoire in their head. So I'll say like, dance the Swan Lake Passage times 2 in your head, because then they'll actually kind of be mentally doing the work, and then it'll get us to the time space to kind of still do it in stillness. But also the idea that when, you know, stillness is that there's a tension there, but for me it's also like, you know, a conceptual space where we're still activated. If I'm holding my hand, you know, out straight or bent for a number of minutes, I'm still working, I'm still laboring. And so for me, it's also this kind of question within, you know, a capitalist space that, you know, of being idle or being lazy. We have to always be in production mode to feel fulfilled or that we're valuable. So I play with that idea of stillness in that way. And that's partially where, you know, even the title Inaction comes from, is that, you know, we don't constantly have to be moving. And that dance itself can be made in stillness. You know, we don't have to always be moving to be considered dancing. And something that happens in my work a lot is people are like, well, are they even dancing? Is it dance? And for me, that's not an interesting question, because it already closes and breaks down a conversation. But it's like, well, how is it? Or, you know, what makes it dance? And so within this, you know, again, grateful to Charles and Kiara, because they take on these strange prompts that I ask them to do, and then they interpret it, and then they make it as well. So that's also part of the collaboration that is so important with working with all of my dancers. But specifically in this proposal, I gave Kiara and Charles a different kind of position and role to take on.
And I think it connects to that interesting play you have between visual art and dance. So it just came up in the chat where the person was saying how she just watched the RAG video, and how I think she's talking about the triangle piece and how it reminds her of art historical paintings like Raft of Medusa. So, you know, that sculptural, that stillness, those elements kind of, and I think Benn talked before about holding space. And I think so much of that performance is that holding of space and that power of collectivity. Go ahead, sure.
And like when we made proposals on the triangle, you know, I said to the dancers, like, think of art historical paintings, think about, you know, friezes on buildings, think, you know, you are building the monument with your bodies here. You know, that was one of the tasks, is like you have to build. And so there was a lot of like mirroring and flanking and kind of creating, you know, I was like, you can be dramatic here. We were allowed to be dramatic and be more, you know, more like ephemeral with our positions. But in other ones, like I think I remember saying in like Square, don't be capital dance with a D. Like, I don't want to see like ballet poses, you know? So there was like these rules, you know? And if you think about it, all choreography is rules, right? It's like, it's giving a set of instructions that you need to follow. And so even within the audience space, there's, you know, they're asking questions like, do I buy tickets? Where do I stand? How long is this? Do I stay the whole time? You know, they're adhering to a set of rules that is part of our everyday choreography, or the ways that we're being told to view performance, or ways that we've been instructed to see art. You know, you don't touch art in a gallery. Here I'm telling the dancers to touch the art. You know, they are the art. So the whole space becomes, you know, a complex kind of, you know, queer space for me that isn't defined. It's many different things, and it's also finding new forms. So going back to that idea that we started with talking about in the beginning, is that, you know, it was a challenging new form to teach and to kind of think through for dance making or art seeing or whatever. Yeah.
So maybe we could shift a bit over to Richmond Art Gallery a little bit. So not only everything we've talked about, but now we throw in 2020, 2021 and a global pandemic. And we pretty much had to go with the punches. Even in January, we felt that Brendan was going to be able to come and to install the show and to work with some dancers. And by this time, we felt in British Columbia that we might be able to host some in-person performances, and none of those things happened. So it became another level of thinking through what this show means now, I think. And I would say from being on the ground that it just felt so pertinent. And I think Ben talked about that the sculptural space without the dancers as missing something, or potentially there's an emptiness to it. And I think because we weren't able to host live performances, I think there's a bit of melancholy to that space, especially in relation to this video, 2-channel video piece we have in the other room, which is almost like a therapy. You're surrounded by these sweaty dancers and you feel the energy of what you can't right now. And then you can definitely feel the Norman Kelley collaborative sculptures are in relation to the body. You can imagine bodies moving through them. So, you know, it's interesting how the Inaction show takes on a different set of meanings. And so what we've done here is we've created a video document. So Brendan worked remotely, me holding his iPad while Brendan talks with the dancers. And you know, we started preparing that there might be live performances, and then we also shifted into producing this video document. And I want to thank Melanie Devoy and Kathy Tykolis on our team who worked so hard to get this. We shot it 2 weeks ago and we put it up on YouTube yesterday. And it just opened up a whole other set of concerns. Oh, look, there's a picture there of Brendan talking with the team. So Brendan, maybe you want to tell us a bit about your experience of working on the performance remotely and kind of the outcomes of it.
Yeah, and you know, for me, it was definitely, again, a new way of doing things, but the outcomes produced what should have been, what happened at Wesleyan. But again, with a lot of collaboration, conversations, I don't know, in the back of my head, I still think I'm coming to Richmond. And I feel like even though like today's the last day of the show, I'm like, I'm still coming. You know, there was this, and I think that resilience or optimism allowed me to kind of still, to still set the piece again, to kind of also, you know, like there I am, like talking them through it. We also had to change certain parts of the choreography. So like this part of Wesleyan, everyone is like linked and touching each other in canon, but we had to separate the bodies in the piece. And so it did change a little bit, but for the most part, I think the collaboration, the exchange, the conversations, the understanding of process was also transferred remotely. You know, it was really an exciting moment because again, it shows me that I can still be, because as I said in the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, can I still make performance art under the auspices of gathering, under the auspices of you know, collectivity, solidarity, and you know, we're all here now. This Zoom grid has become this platform that brings us together. The virtual space is a safe space, and you know, my interactions are there. And you know, here we're reaching a number of people as well to kind of speak about the project and to share about the project. And so that exchange also happened with me and the dancers. And I, you know, I obviously miss being with dancers in person. Like I miss, like, you know, working in a studio and playing, but you know, it still happened. You know, we were doing it together in this moment, and the outcome was successful.
Yeah, and this might be for everyone to kind of answer. What I really love about the work is the push and pull between different ideas of dance. So I think of Freeform for Camera, the video piece in the show, and I think of that the dance club, the free space of dance expression in whatever form, and then I think of the professional dance space, and I think even watching the movements in action, there's a lot of imperfection and it's sort of celebrated. There's a play going on and there's that push and pull between the perfect pose and movement and the little slip up. And I love how every performance is a little different because of that. And I think maybe because the score is so open as well. I don't know if the dancers or Benn or Brendan had some thoughts about that.
So like within my scores, like, you know, there is an openness, there's a porousness so that people can interpret. And I kind of come with my scores through a fluxus expression, that I'm thinking through spontaneity, improvisation, but also giving agency to the dancer to make choice, right? So again, I said, like, be a monument on the triangle, but within that, you pick the kind of monument you want to be. So, or how that monument gets built or formed. And so for me, there's a lot of openness within the score. And I think that for me is like a pushback from my background as a ballet dancer, where everything is choreographed, everything is done one way. There's a certain desire of like how your hand is held or your head gesture that Charles does so well all the time. But I just I kind of like push back on that, right? Especially in this piece, it's about playing games. They're skipping, they're falling, they're jumping, they're leaping. Like those are part of like the gestures to experiment with. And where in other pieces, like, Master and Form, it was like the desired ballet body, but, we're going to perform it, but also still find ways to find new narratives and criticalities within that. So that's just a little bit about, the Inaction score.
Yeah, and I feel there's a different, some of the other works, Master and Form, these connect into S&M and ballet in these stricter forms, and embracing the darkness in a certain way. And I feel like Inaction is this warm, positive, how we support each other kind of playful gesture. So I like that juxtaposition within your different shows and within your different performances. Yeah.
Sure, but I still think within this piece, there's discipline, right? The dancers by nature were disciplined. We have a very specific way, like even if I tell them to walk, they're going to walk in a very specific way with affect. But so again, it's not a technical dance in the sense, but the dancers still have discipline and very immediate ways of dancing with a certain sense of purpose or authority, because their bodies are trained. This is, again, dancers are athletes and artists. And so there's a certain combination within physicality, but also artistry that comes into play within this piece as well. And I think, again, that's why Kiara and Charles were such a key part, because they learned the process and then they brought their experiences from past working with me, but their past dance stuff to kind of then share with the others as well.
Yeah. Kiara and Charles, I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that the openness of the form and how and the process of interpreting and also representing the process for the other dancers, because you were both in a kind of position of leadership relative to the other dancers in the performance.
I feel like many of the performances that I've been in with Brendan, they often start out with a concept of play, and we'll go into the studio and we'll sort of get a sort of broad concept, and then we'll go and sort of suss that out, and each individual dancer will move around, and then something will like pop up from that, and Brendan will stop us and we'll note it, and then that becomes part of the score. So like if somebody's arm was a certain way, like that arm could come up as often as you wanted throughout the performance. And with this concept of monuments, I also included part of my dance training in it, and bringing up like Cunningham positions and other ballet positions and like Nureyev positions. All these other things could go into the performance because the score allows for it, which is really beautiful when you see like many people's histories coming into the space at once.
Yeah, I think there's definitely discipline in the work. I felt the discipline in the sense that like there is a lot of silence, there is a lot of standing still, and like when you come into that space, your mindset might be like, well, like my mindset in that time was like, oh my God, I have all these tests, blah, 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 as a student. But like sometimes your mindset might be like, I need to come into this space and meditate and take this time to kind of like breathe and like live in this discipline of like standing in silence for this allotted amount of time. yeah, and even in like the rules of like even like discipline and having like one specific rule on a monument, it still felt like what Charles was saying, you bring yourself into that rule. So like how Charles just interpreted like being in that square, I'm like more of a person that likes to be closer to the ground in movement. Like I feel more grounded. I feel like I like want to plie or like just bend my knees more. And there's room for me to kind of like fit into that rule, but also like be completely myself because that's how I understood that rule. I also want to say like a little bit too of like when Ben was talking about just like activating the space with like dancers and coming in and out. I think that like, yeah, like there were so many bodies in that space of like we were dancing and doing like the showings, but we were also having like dance parties in that space, which is like another way of like bringing people in of all different dance levels to come and move in this space. And I think that was a really important part of it because the collaborative part made it feel like a community because there was this cohort of dancers, but then also that community extended to like the entire campus, which doesn't really come in and out of the Zilkha gallery that often. So seeing like this whole community come in because of a score or because of the pieces or because of the mission of like what work we're doing, it expands community. It invites more people to dance and question what dance is and how does it exist for themselves, which I thought was really, really important.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. At Richmond, I mean, we've had as everyone, we've had such a tough go over the past, year, and there were times I think questioning who our audience is, questioning why we're doing exhibitions, and it just all clicked when the dancers were in the space rehearsing, and it just felt like an emotional, really positive moment over the past few weeks, and a real special moment, even if it is with a small group, and even if it is, a video on YouTube right now. That energy was there, and I think I'm so grateful. The gallery is so grateful, to Brendan, to Zahra, Kevin, Bynh, and Rachel, the dancers who participated, for coming into our bubble and doing this with us. And I think it's those I was talking the other day about concentric circles, and it's like the inner circle, the people that work in the gallery, the friends of the gallery, and even those smaller groups, it's so meaningful, like the gathering of people, and so important. So Brendan, thank you so much for bringing this together.
No, thank you. And I think for me, this is my first show in a year, and so it got me to start thinking and being creative again, because I think in the pandemic there was a stopping, a moment of stillness, which was important for me to gather, to reclaim. But now coming back, it was such an honor to collaborate again with you, Shaun, and with the Richmond Art Gallery, and to bring this work, which is so important to a new audience, and a Canadian audience, a home audience, an audience that I miss. I can't be in Canada right now, but I was still in Canada, so that was something that was really great. I'm grateful for that. I could be there without being there, but on an iPad. So yeah.
So I want to open it up to questions from our audience, our viewers. So please enter in the Q&A, but also Ben or Brendan, or Melanie or Kathy, who are on with us, if you want to ask a question as well. I'm open to that too. Actually, Melanie, since you're here, it might be, I don't have Rachel here, it might be great to hear. Melanie is the videographer and our staff member who shot the video. I'm not sure if you'd be open to giving your perspective on what that experience was like to shoot the video piece for us at the gallery.
Hi. This
Hi.
is Melanie. I don't have my video on right now, as I wasn't feeling very well last night, so I'll just be a voice in the background.
That's great.
So it was a bit of a challenge to film this, just given that the Richmond Art Gallery space is unlike the the original space is a bit of an eccentric space. It's one of the eccentricity of the space is something that we love, but it's also something that makes it very challenging to film in. But throughout the process of working with Brendan, working with the dancers, I mean, this is not really a very typical type of work that we have in the gallery. And so it was a really kind of a revelation for me to just, again, see these sculptures that were populating this space that we're so familiar with just become activated with these very passionate performers. And yeah, it was incredibly moving. And what was nice about it was that over spring break, our center that the gallery is located in, we were having very small, limited spring break camps in the building. And so we were able to actually have some young people come in and experience the space. And we, we sat in a circle with, 6 to 8 year olds children, and they watched clips of the dancers rehearsing, doing the ring around the rosy. And they were just so thrilled to experience this. And we talked about childhood games, and we talked about the games that they play and what the dancers were doing, but also just connecting it with, we watched the free fall for camera as well. And that was also quite an experience for these young people. So that was just such a wonderful gift to be able to share a really different form of art with a different part of the Richmond Art Gallery's audience. And that's also why I'm very grateful we had the chance to do the filming as well, because then we could kind of preserve a little bit of that experience and it can live on a bit. Anyway, yeah, just there's just been so many wonderful moments throughout this exhibition. So we are all very grateful that we had a chance to participate, and then it can live on a little bit in this video form.
Thanks so much, Melanie. So we don't have any questions, so maybe we're off the hook for today. I wondered if anyone, in our group had any last thoughts about the project, about the performance. I'm opening the floor now for a few seconds.
Yeah, I have one more question for Kiara and Charles, I guess, just because I'm curious. We've talked a lot about the kind of experience of viewing the dance, and then a little bit about how the choreography kind of opened up, but I'm really curious to hear about your experience as a dancer, your somatic experience. Like what did you learn in your body over the course of the 3 months we had the exhibition up in Middletown? How did you notice that it changed you or didn't? What did you learn or not about your own movements and habits and ways of approaching dance? I'm just curious what that kind of like bodily knowledge that you gained from participating. And I know we're talking about something that was a year and a half ago, and a lot has happened in the last year and a half, but whatever that provokes, I'm curious, because you have a unique experience. You can speak to a kind of unique experience on the inside of that process that all of us are even Brendan on the outside looking in.
Something that came up for me in the Master in Form and then continued in this piece was the way I would go through the score, a bit like a puzzle, sort of like fitting into slots with positions. So like as I would shift through on the triangle, like allowing, not thinking too much about like how I was going to get to the position, but arriving and realizing that I've arrived and sort of sitting with that. So like going through this, like sliding into positions, which I find to be really fun, and part of the play that I think the whole piece is about.
Yeah, I somatically, like my mind goes straight to kind of my vision and like my eyes, because you know, Wesleyan is not huge. Like my friends were fully in the space staring back at me while I'm like standing there for a minute and 30 seconds and like, you know, doing it so unapologetically that like it's just that's what I'm doing. So my mind kind of went straight to vision, and also like being on a proscenium stage, you can kind of have this like looking out, but you can't really see like the lights are, you see the lights, you see the darkness, you're not really making like any sort of eye contact with people. So that was something that I felt uncomfortable with in the beginning. And then I felt like my confidence grew over time. And it kind of felt like because it was the score and we were coming into the space, we had a schedule, like after school, after class, I was going into the gallery. Like it just felt like I was owning the space. Like it felt like the space kind of started to become mine. And so whoever kind of came in or would obstruct my vision or would be there in front of me, it just felt like they were becoming a part of the world and not that there was any sort of like dissonance between it. And I also think like my favorite ones were like the tumblers of like the kind of jack like structures that in the beginning I felt kind of scared of them. And I like would only go towards certain ones and do that. But like as I became more confident, kind of what you were saying, Ben, like I felt more grounded. I felt more very like just there. Like I felt like my presence was kind of flowing more through my body because I was taking these choices and sticking with them and saying that like that was what you were saying as well, Charles. Like this is my choice, and that's the end of the sentence.
I think also like, you know, having the opportunity to perform something, you know, multiple times allows the dancers to start to build on their vocabulary. So I would notice things like Charles would come and take that position and give me that pose on certain things, or Kiara would do the same thing. So I think we start to kind of understand the objects more. It's not such a foreign thing, especially when you've kind of already learned it. And so it's like any dance, you know, we learn it in our bodies, and then eventually it's just there, and then the rest is, you know, we just kind of do it. So there was that kind of building I could see in their bodies. They were taking in and finding ways that they're like, oh, I like this position, I'll do this here. In the center of the circle, this is the position I'll take on. And, you know, so I think that was something that's really beautiful, that, you know, the dancers have their own agency and authority to make choice, but then to also kind of like learn and just sort of come, so that just sort of like automatically comes out of the body then.
Maybe on that note, any last thoughts? Brendan, what did you learn?
What did I learn? As I said, it was, you know, it's always, you know, how to work with different, you know, a new form of how to make a dance, you know, through this kind of like, you know, giving process, and then saying, Charles, go forward with it. Kiara, go forward with it. And so just, you know, it was a new process that I had never done, and I, you know, would love to kind of perform again. So, because for me, I'm always trying to look inside and find other ways of thinking through things. And so even from this conversation, I'm like, oh, my head's like starting to percolate, and I'm going to think of a new dance. And then and so yeah, and also how social distancing for us really challenged the way to make dance again. So but the optimism and resilience, I think, is something that dancers always impose and perform and act, and that was something that came out of like both of the processes at Wesleyan and at Richmond. So I think yeah, but again, you know, the collaboration is so important, and I'm so grateful for Charles and Kiara and all the other dancers, and you know, of course to you and Benn and Richmond Art Gallery and Wesleyan Zilkha Gallery. So yeah.
Well, maybe we'll call it an end to today, and everyone can enjoy their Saturday afternoon. So I want to thank everyone so much: Kiara, Charles, Brendan, Benn, Jazz for her intro, Kathy and Melanie for their support in the background. Today is the last day of Inaction at Richmond Art Gallery. You have 2 hours if you are in the Lower Mainland area to go see the shows. So rush on over there and check it out. We also shared the link to the performance video in this chat, but you'll see it all over our social media and on our website. So thank you so much, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good to see you guys.